Dear beloved, across the world we've shared countless testimonies of faith. Stories of men and women who encountered the living God in the most unexpected ways. From distant nations to the very heart of places once thought unreachable, God continues to reveal His power. But today's story is unlike anything you've heard before. You are about to witness a divine encounter that shook the very ground of false beliefs. I was born as Princess Layla bint Karim Al Sayed, a daughter of one of the oldest royal families in the Gulf. From the outside, people saw shining palaces, private schools, and a life where every need was met before I even asked. But deep inside, I lived with a quiet emptiness that followed me everywhere. I never spoke about it because in a palace, silence is safer than honesty. People look at you and think you are blessed, but I knew something important was missing inside me. Everything changed on a morning in March 2024. I woke up expecting my usual routine of lessons, meetings, and carefully planned movements. But as I walked down the long marble corridor of our family estate, I felt something shift in my heart. I didn't know what it was, but it felt as if my life was about to divide into a before and an after. It was a strange moment, like someone pulling a curtain in my soul. I didn't understand it then, but it was the beginning of a journey I had never asked for. Later that same day, I found myself drawn to a quiet storage house behind the palace gardens. No one had used it for years. I can't explain why I felt pulled toward it, but my feet moved without thinking. When I opened the rusty door, sunlight fell on dusty tables, old books, and forgotten furniture. I didn't know it at the time, but this small hidden place would become the center of a storm that would nearly take my life and lead me to the truth about God in a way I never imagined. In the weeks that followed, I began visiting the old storage house every evening. At first, it was just a quiet escape from the strict palace routines. But slowly, the place began to feel different. I started cleaning it, moving old chairs, and dusting shelves that had not been touched in years. Each time I entered, it felt like a weight lifted from my chest. I didn't know why this forgotten building gave me peace, but it became the only place where I could breathe freely. I kept it hidden because royalty was not supposed to have secrets, especially not a princess. One afternoon, while clearing a corner, I found a small wooden box buried under torn cloth. Inside it were two old books, handwritten in a language I didn't recognize at first. When I flipped through them, I realized they were Christian writings, copied by someone long ago. I had never held anything like that before. Even though I didn't fully understand the words, something in them felt alive. I didn't know if it was curiosity or something deeper, but I kept returning to those pages. They made me think about life, truth, and God in ways I had never dared to consider. At night, I began reading them slowly, quietly, like a child learning to walk. As I read, I felt something moving inside me, something warm and steady. One night, as I sat alone in that small room with only a lamp for light, I felt a presence that filled the space. I didn't hear a voice with my ears, but inside my heart, it felt like someone was letting me know that I was being called. I didn't understand what it meant, but I knew something holy was beginning, and I could not turn away from it anymore. One night, a heavy rain fell over the palace grounds. Everyone stayed inside, but I slipped quietly out of my room and went to the storage house as I always did. The sound of the rain hitting the roof made the room feel warmer than usual. I sat on the floor with the old books open in front of me. As I read, a calmness came over me that I had never felt before. It wasn't like the comfort of safe walls or soft clothes. It felt deeper, like something was touching my soul. I didn't know how to describe it, but I felt that God was near me even though I didn't yet understand who He truly was. As I sat there, the lamp flickered, and for a moment the whole room grew still. I wasn't afraid. Instead, I felt a strong peace settling over me. It was so gentle that I almost cried. It felt as if someone was letting me know that He had been watching my life for a long time. He made me feel seen, not as a princess, not as a member of a strict royal family, but as a simple human being who needed love. I remember placing my hand on my chest because it felt like my heart was softening, like something inside me was waking up. That night, I whispered a prayer for the first time. I didn't know the right words, so I just spoke from my heart. I asked God to show me the truth. I told him I was tired of living with emptiness. As I prayed, I felt a warmth settle over me again, and it was as if he told me that he would guide me step by step. I didn't hear a sound, but the message was clear inside me. I stayed in that room until the rain stopped, and by the time I walked back to the palace, I knew my life had changed forever, even though I didn't know where the journey would lead next. The deeper I went into the old writings, the more I felt pulled toward them. Each lesson, each story, each prayer touched something in me that had been silent for years. I started copying small verses into a notebook and hiding it under my mattress. I didn't tell anyone, not even the servants I trusted. In a royal family like mine, faith was controlled and watched closely. Any interest in another belief was seen as rebellion. Even so, I couldn't stop reading. It felt like light entering a room that had been dark all my life. One afternoon, I returned from the storage house feeling peaceful, unaware that I had made a mistake. I had forgotten to close the small window behind the shelves. A guard on routine patrol noticed the open window and reported it. Later that evening, I walked into the room and found 2 palace guards inspecting the place. My breath froze as I saw them holding the old wooden box with the ancient Christian writings. They looked confused, suspicious, and surprised. I tried to stay calm, but inside I felt fear rising like a wave. I knew those books could put me in danger if anyone discovered they were mine. The guards didn't say much that night, but I knew they would report everything to the palace officials. In our family, even small matters were taken seriously, and this was not small. When I returned to my room, I felt a weight pressing on my chest. I sat on my bed, holding the notebook I had copied verses into, and I prayed quietly, asking God for help. I told him I didn't want to deny the truth I had found. I felt him letting me know that I should be still and trust him. Even though fear tried to take over me, I held on to that feeling of peace, not knowing that the real trial was yet to begin. 2 days later, I was called to the main council room of the palace. It was unusual for someone like me, a young princess, to be summoned alone. When I entered, my father, 3 senior advisors, and the chief legal officer were seated around the long table. Their faces were hard and unreadable. My heart pounded, but I kept my eyes on the floor. I knew this had to be connected to the old books. I wished I could turn back time, but it was too late for that now. The room felt cold even though the air was warm. My father asked me why the storage house contained forbidden writings. His voice was calm, but he was angry underneath. I tried to explain that I had only been reading out of curiosity. I didn't mention the peace I felt or the prayers I had whispered. I knew those details would only make things worse. The advisors exchanged looks, and the chief officer wrote something on a paper. He said that what I had done could be seen as rejection of our family's faith, and a threat to the reputation of the royal household. Hearing those words made my knees weak. It felt as if the world I had known all my life was collapsing beneath me. By the end of the meeting, the decision was made. I was to remain inside the palace, watched closely, with all my movements restricted. They said they needed time to investigate whether my actions showed signs of apostasy. That word echoed in my mind long after I left the room. I returned to my bedroom feeling confused and afraid. I sat quietly on the floor and prayed again, asking God to stay with me. I felt him letting me know that he had not abandoned me, even though everything around me was falling apart. I didn't know what would happen next, but I held on to that one small hope inside me. Even under watch, I could not ignore what God had placed in my heart. I knew the storage building could become a place for others to meet him safely, and I could not let fear stop me. Late at night, I would slip quietly past the guards and tend to the small chapel I had begun to prepare. I brought in simple mats, candles, and hidden copies of the New Testament that Elizabeth had helped me acquire. Every detail was hidden, every action careful, but my spirit felt alive in a way it never had before. The first woman to join me was Miriam, a teacher in her late 20s who seemed lost despite her accomplishments. She came quietly, sitting on the mat as I read to her from the Gospel. I could see tears forming as she realized that there was someone who understood her emptiness. Her hands trembled as she whispered a prayer, and I felt the same peace I had felt that first night I surrendered to Jesus. It was simple, almost fragile, but it was real. That night, I prayed with her alone, and it felt like God had filled the entire room with light. Word spread carefully, quietly, among a few trusted women. By the third month, there were 6 of us meeting secretly. Each had her own story of loneliness, fear, or doubt. Each discovered a small flame of hope in the chapel. We whispered prayers, sang softly, and read the scriptures together, learning what it meant to have a life anchored in God rather than in titles or possessions. Even though danger was always near, I felt God reminding me that these gatherings mattered far more than the fear that threatened me. I want to invite you to share your prayer requests in the comments below. Whatever you're facing today, whether it's a personal challenge, a family situation, a health concern, or simply a desire for spiritual growth, our intercessory team is here to stand with you in prayer. We believe in the power of collective prayer, and we don't want you to carry your burdens alone. Take a moment to write out your request, and know that it will be lifted up with faith and compassion by our prayer warriors who are committed to interceding on your behalf. By the start of the following year, I realized our chapel could no longer be limited to women. God showed me that His family is meant to worship together, regardless of gender, and the people searching for Him needed fellowship, not separation. Inviting men was far more dangerous. Discovery would mean immediate punishment, even death. But I could not ignore what I knew God had called me to do. I prayed constantly for wisdom and protection before taking the first step. The first man who came was Yusuf, a young engineer whose wife, Layla, had already found hope in the chapel. He arrived quietly one night, hesitant, unsure. I could feel the fear in him because I had felt it myself. Together we prayed, and I could see God touching his heart. His eyes, once burdened with doubt, glimmered with new understanding. I watched as he knelt, surrendering himself, and I knew that every risk was worth it. This was not just teaching, it was life being transformed. Soon, couples joined quietly, each seeking answers in secret. Omar and Hannah were married for over a decade but had never spoken about their doubts openly. In the safety of our small chapel, they wept together, confessed their fears, and found the courage to believe in Jesus. Week by week, the small gatherings grew, people cautiously bringing others they trusted. By mid-year, more than 30 men and women were worshiping in secret, holding on to hope as we learned to walk in faith, trusting God above every worldly authority. One evening, just as the moon was rising, my heart sank. My younger brother, Faisal, had wandered through the palace gardens. He paused near the chapel and through the small window. He saw the congregation, men and women kneeling together, praying and singing softly. I froze when I realized he was watching. He did not enter or speak, but I knew he would report what he had seen. That moment changed everything. By dawn, I was summoned to my father's private office. His presence filled the room with a cold authority I had never felt so strongly. He did not shout or cry. He only asked, quietly but firmly, if the reports about the chapel were true. I could have lied. I could have denied everything, claimed it was research, or said I had been misled. But looking at his eyes and remembering the lives of the people I had guided to Jesus, I could not. I told him the truth. The consequences came swiftly. Religious authorities were called. My journals, the Bibles, and every detail of the chapel were seized. Some of the members were arrested immediately. I watched in silence as men and women I had prayed over and guided were led away. I knew that standing firm in my faith might cost my life. Fear gripped me, but in the quiet of my soul, God's presence reassured me. I realized that the kingdom of God is never limited by danger or human authority. The trial was held in a cold, shadowed courtroom. I sat alone while the charges were read. Apostasy, leading others into faith, desecrating royal property. Every word felt like a hammer striking my chest. My own journals were read aloud, my prayers and teachings used as evidence against me. My father sat in silence, his face unreadable. My mother wept quietly beside him. My brother's eyes were filled with disdain. The judge gave me a chance to recant. I could have said the words, returned to my former life, and survived. A small part of me trembled at the thought. But when I remembered Fatima, Khaled, and the others kneeling in that small chapel, I could not. I understood that truth mattered more than safety, and that the lives of others depended on someone being willing to stand firm. I looked at the courtroom and let my voice be heard. I would not deny Jesus. I belonged to him. The sentence was pronounced: death. My body would be taken, my title erased, my family's name tarnished in their eyes. I was alone, yet paradoxically filled with a calm that surpassed understanding. Fear tried to creep in, but God reminded me of his promises. The presence that had sustained me in secret chapel nights was still with me. Life may leave me in chains, but my soul would remain free. I realized then that God's kingdom cannot be taken, and no earthly authority could touch the eternal life he had given. I was released, quietly taken far from home, stripped of every title, every possession, every identity I had ever known. For the first time I walked in streets without guards, without expectations, without a mask to wear. I had nothing, yet I felt everything. Peace filled the hollow places where fear and loneliness had once lived. I knew that losing my palace and privilege was a small price for the lives of those 89 souls who had found Jesus in the chapel I built. Now each day is simple, ordinary, yet filled with purpose. I see the fruit of God's work in Fatima teaching women who were once desperate, in Khaled leading a small fellowship, in lives healed and marriages restored. I remember baptizing them by moonlight, the whispers of worship echoing against stone walls, the tears, the prayers, the hope that refused to die. God showed me that obedience is not about comfort or safety. It is about love, courage, and faithfulness to his call. I want to speak to you now. Wherever your garden is, your home, your workplace, your circle of influence, consider what God might want you to do with it. There is power in obedience, in courage, in risking comfort for someone else's eternity. Pray, read God's word, love others deeply, and let your faith be active. The cost may be high, but the reward is eternal. Your life can touch others in ways you cannot yet see. I traded a crown for God's kingdom, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. Trust him, serve him, and walk boldly in his love. If you haven't subscribed yet, we'd be truly honored to have you join this growing family of faith and reflection. Every new heart adds something beautiful to our community. God